My name is Jake. I'm 29, and I never thought I'd be the type of person to cause a scene at a family gathering. I'm more of a keep your head down, avoid confrontation kind of guy. But sometimes life has other plans for you, and sometimes those plans involve standing up in front of 50 people at your father's retirement party and proving him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened that night in Chicago changed everything. Not just for me, but for my entire family. If I'm being honest, I'm still processing it all 3 weeks later. But maybe telling this story will help me make sense of how 30 years of silence finally found its voice. Let me start from the beginning. Growing up in the suburbs of Milwaukee, our house always felt like it was designed for one star and one understudy. My older brother Ryan was the star. He's 3 years older than me, 6'2", quarterback of the varsity team, homecoming king, the whole package. He had this natural charisma that made teachers love him, girls follow him around, and parents at school events asked my mom if she had any parenting secrets. I was the understudy. 5'9" on a good day, preferred books to sports, spent most of my free time tinkering with computers in the basement. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but in the Peterson household, there was definitely a hierarchy, and I wasn't at the top of it. Dad worked as a regional manager for a manufacturing company. Nothing glamorous, but steady work that kept food on the table and paid for Ryan's football camps every summer. Mom was a part-time nurse at the local clinic. The kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday and never missed a school event, even mine. But here's the thing about being the second son in a family. Where the first son is perfect, you become really good at being invisible. Not ignored exactly, but ... overlooked. Like when Ryan made varsity as a sophomore, Dad took a half day off work to drive around town telling everyone he knew. When I made the honor roll for semesters straight, I got a good job, buddy. At dinner, and that was it. I remember the exact moment I realized I was fighting a losing battle. I was 15, sitting in the living room with my laptop, working on this program I'd been coding for weeks. It was nothing fancy by today's standards, but back then, creating a simple game from scratch felt like magic. I was so proud of it, so excited to show someone what I'd built. Ryan was on the couch watching SportsCenter, and Dad was in his recliner reading the paper. I closed my laptop and walked over to them. "Hey Dad, want to see something cool I made?" He looked up from the sports section with that distracted expression parents get when they're not really listening but trying to appear interested. "Sure." "Jake, what is it?" I opened my laptop and launched the game. It was a simple maze runner, but I'd programmed different levels, power-ups, even a scoring system. I'd spent hours on the graphics, making sure every pixel was perfect. I built this whole game from scratch, I said, my voice getting more excited as I explained the features. "See, you collect these gems to unlock new levels. I programmed it so the maze gets more complex each time, and that's nice, son," Dad interrupted.
Already?
Looking back at his paper. "Maybe you should spend less time on the computer and more time outside, though. Ryan's got his friends coming over later to throw the football around. You should join them." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they were so casually dismissive. I'd poured weeks of work into something I thought was genuinely impressive, and he'd written it off in 10 seconds. Ryan didn't even look up from the TV. I closed my laptop and went back to my room. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just learned something important about my place in this family. I wasn't the athletic son, the charismatic son, the son who made Dad beam with pride at neighborhood barbecues. I was the other one. The one who was fine, who wasn't causing trouble, who would probably turn out okay, but wasn't worth bragging about. High school was more of the same. Ryan's football achievements lined the hallway walls while my academic awards went in a drawer. Ryan's girlfriend came to family dinners while my interests were treated as phases I'd grow out of. Ryan's college recruitment visits became family events while my early acceptance to Northwestern on a partial scholarship got a congratulations text from Mom while she was at Ryan's playoff game. Don't get me wrong, I don't think my parents were intentionally playing favorites. They loved me in their way. But love and attention are different things, and attention was rationed in our house. There was only so much to go around, and Ryan used most of it up just by existing. By senior year, I'd stopped trying to compete. I'd focused on my grades, my coding projects, and my college applications. I had a plan: get into a good school, study computer science, and build a career that had nothing to do with football or small-town expectations. I was going to prove myself on my own terms. Northwestern was perfect. Far enough from home to feel independent, close enough that I could still visit if I wanted to. The computer science program was top-notch, and for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who got excited about the same things I did. Programming languages, algorithms, app development. This was my world, and I was finally good at something that mattered. I threw myself into my studies with the intensity of someone who'd been waiting his whole life to find his calling. I took extra classes, joined coding clubs, spent weekends in the computer lab working on projects that fascinated me. My grades were excellent. My professors took notice. I started getting opportunities I'd never imagined. Junior year, I landed an internship at a startup in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous, mostly debugging code and testing interfaces, but I was working alongside people who'd graduated from MIT and Stanford, building software that actual users would interact with. I felt like I was finally where I belonged. The internship turned into a job offer, and by the time I graduated, I had a position lined up as a junior developer at a growing tech company. The salary was more than Dad made as a regional manager. The work was exactly what I dreamed of doing. I called home the night I signed my offer letter, expecting at least some enthusiasm from my parents. Mom was happy for me, asked about the benefits and whether I'd found an apartment yet. Dad's response was more measured. "That's good, Jake. Computer stuff is steady work. Not as reliable as manufacturing, but I guess there's a market for it." That was it. No congratulations, no pride in his voice, just acknowledgement that I'd found employment. Meanwhile, Ryan's latest promotion at the insurance company, where he'd started after college, had prompted a family dinner and a toast. I moved to Chicago and dove into my career. The work was challenging and rewarding. The city was exciting, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I made friends, dated, explored the city, and slowly built a life that felt entirely my own. 3 years later, I was promoted to senior developer. 2 years after that, I was leading a team of 6 people. By 28, I was making 6 figures and had equity in a company that was growing fast. I'd found my success, my identity, it's my place in the world. But here's what I learned about family dynamics. They don't change just because you do. Every time I went home for holidays or birthdays, I slipped back into the same role I'd played as a teenager. Ryan was still the golden child, still the one whose opinions mattered, whose stories dominated dinner conversation. I was still the quiet one, the one who was doing fine, but nothing worth making a fuss about. It didn't matter that I was designing software used by millions of people, or that I'd been featured in a tech magazine, or that I'd just bought a condo in one of Chicago's nicest neighborhoods. At home, I was still Jake, Ryan's little brother, the one who was good with computers, and maybe I would have been content to keep playing that role forever, showing up for family events, being polite and pleasant and invisible. Maybe I would have continued to let Ryan be the star while I built my own life quietly in the background. But then Dad announced his retirement party, 35 years at the same company. And they were throwing him a celebration at the Marriott downtown. The whole family was expected to attend, along with his coworkers, old friends, and various extended relatives I hadn't seen in years. I almost didn't go. I had a product launch the following week, and I could have easily used work as an excuse. But Mom called personally to ask me to be there, and despite everything, I couldn't disappoint her, so I bought a new suit, cleared my schedule, and drove back to Milwaukee for what I thought would be just another family gathering where I'd smile politely and try not to feel invisible. I had no idea that night would change everything. The Marriott's ballroom was exactly what I expected. Beige. Carpeting, crystal chandeliers that had seen better days, and round tables covered in white linens. The kind of venue that hosted hundreds of retirement parties, wedding receptions, and corporate events without any of them being particularly memorable. I arrived fashionably late, hoping to slip in unnoticed and find a seat near the back. The parking lot was already full of sensible sedans and SUVs. It's a kind of cars that screamed responsible adult with a 401k. My Tesla looked out of place among them, which felt appropriate. The moment I walked through the doors, I was hit with a wave of nostalgia that wasn't entirely pleasant. The smell of industrial carpet cleaner mixed with catered food. The sound of middle-aged voices trying to talk over generic background music. The sight of people I hadn't seen in years who would inevitably ask what I was doing with my life. "Jake, oh my goodness, look at you." Aunt Linda materialized beside me before I'd even made it 5 feet into the room. She was Dad's sister, a woman who had perfected the art of invasive questioning disguised as friendly interest. "You look so grown up in that suit, very fancy. What are you doing these days? Still playing around with computers? Playing around? 29 years old, leading a development team at a company valued at $50 million, and she was asking if I was still playing around with computers. "I work in software development," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "In Chicago?" "Oh, how nice. You know, my neighbor's son does something with computers too. IT support, I think." You two would probably have a lot to talk about, before I could explain that software development and IT support were about as similar as being a chef and a dishwasher. She was already scanning the room for her next conversation target. "Well, you should go say hi to your father. He's been so excited about tonight." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I made my way deeper into the ballroom, nodding politely at familiar faces and avoiding eye contact with others. The crowd was exactly what I'd expected. Dad's coworkers from the plant, neighbors from our old street, relatives who showed up to every family event, whether they were particularly close to us or not. Near the front of the room, I spotted Ryan holding court with a group of Dad's younger colleagues. Even at 32, he still had that quarterback confidence, that easy charm that made people lean in when he talked. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, and his wedding ring caught the light as he gestured animatedly. Ryan had married his college girlfriend, Sarah, 2 years after graduation. She was everything my parents had hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Beautiful, sweet, from a good family and completely devoted to Ryan. They'd bought a house in the same suburb where we'd grown up, joined the country club, and produced 2 adorable kids who called my parents Grandma and Grandpa. Their life was a perfect magazine spread, holiday photos with matching outfits, family vacations to Disney World, Little League games where Ryan coached and Sarah organized the snack schedule. It was exactly the kind of life that made sense to everyone in this room. My life, by comparison, was harder to explain. I lived in a downtown condo, worked for a company most people had never heard of, and spent my free time on projects that sounded like science fiction to anyone over 50. I was successful by any objective measure, but my success didn't translate easily to small talk at retirement parties. "Jake, there you are." Mom appeared at my elbow, looking elegant in a burgundy dress I'd never seen before. She'd clearly put effort into tonight, and I could see the pride in her eyes as she looked around the room full of people who'd come to celebrate Dad. "Doesn't everything look wonderful?" The catering company did such a nice job with the decorations. I looked around at the generic centerpieces and standard ballroom setup. "It looks great, Mom. Dad must be thrilled." "Yes. He's been talking about this night for months." "Oh, you should see the slideshow they put together. Photos from his whole career. There's even one of you and Ryan from the company picnic when you were little. The company picnic." I remembered that day vaguely. Ryan would have been maybe 10, which made me 7. We'd spent the afternoon playing games organized by the HR department while the adults networked and complained about management. It was one of the few times I could remember feeling like a normal part of the Peterson family unit. "Come on, let's go find your father. He'll want to see you." Mom guided me through the crowd toward the center of the room, where Dad was standing, with a group of men I recognized as his longtime colleagues. They were the kind of guys who'd worked their way up from the factory floor, who measured success in years of service and pension benefits, rather than stock options and startup valuations. Dad saw me approaching and his face lit up with genuine warmth. Whatever complicated feelings existed between us, I'd never doubted that he loved me in his way. "There's my boy. Jake, come here and meet some of the guys from work." He put his arm around my shoulders and introduced me to the circle of men, most of whom I'd met at various company events over the years. They nodded politely and asked the usual questions about what I was doing, where I was living, whether I was married yet. "Jake's got a good job in Chicago," Dad said, and I could hear the pride in his voice, even if it was tempered with something else, not quite understanding maybe, or not quite knowing how to brag about something he couldn't fully grasp. "Kind of work?" asked Bill Henderson, a guy who'd started at the company the same day as Dad and had become one of his closest friends over the decades. "Software development," I said. "I lead a team that builds applications for mobile devices, like games." Bill's son was probably in his early 20s, so he at least had some frame of reference for what I did. Some games, but mostly productivity. Apps, tools that help people manage their businesses, track their finances, that kind of thing. "Huh. Good money on that?" It was such a direct question that I almost laughed. In their world, you measured success in concrete terms. Salary, benefits, job security. The abstract concepts that drove the tech industry disruption, scalability. Market penetration didn't translate. "It's been good to me," I said diplomatically. Dad jumped in before anyone could ask follow-up questions. "Jake's always been the smart one. Got the brains for all that technical stuff. It's a smart one." That was how he'd always described me, like intelligence was a consolation prize for not being athletic or charismatic. Ryan was the achiever, the leader, the one who made things happen, was the smart one, which sounded like a compliment, but somehow never felt like one. The conversation moved on to safer topics, the weather, local politics, retirement plans. I half-listened while scanning the room, taking in the scene that would soon become the backdrop for whatever was about to happen. Near the bar, I spotted my cousins from Dad's side of the family, people I saw maybe once a year at holidays. We're good people, but we'd never been particularly close. Geography and age differences had kept us in separate orbits, and now we were all adults with our own lives and responsibilities. Sarah was at a table with some of the other wives, no doubt discussing schools and soccer schedules and vacation plans. She caught my eye and waved, and I waved back. She'd always been kind to me. Even when it was clear that her loyalty belonged entirely to Ryan and their nuclear family unit. The kids. Ryan's kids were running around between tables. With some of the other children in attendance, they were cute kids, well-behaved and polite, but I barely knew them. I saw them a few times a year, sent birthday presents that Mom picked out, and occupied the role of Uncle Jake in their lives without really understanding what that meant. This was my family, I realized as I looked around the room. These were the people who were supposed to know me best, who'd watch me grow up, who should understand what I'd become. And yet I felt like a stranger among them, like someone playing a role he'd never quite learned properly. The feeling wasn't new, but it felt more acute tonight, maybe because I was seeing everything through the lens of Dad's retirement. This was his celebration, his moment to look back on 35 years of work and feel proud of what he'd built. But it was also a reminder that I'd built my life somewhere else, with people he'd never met, doing work he didn't really understand. Excused myself from the group and headed toward the bar, needing a drink and a moment to collect myself. The bartender was a professional, the kind who'd worked hundreds of events like this and could make conversation without really engaging. "What can I get you?" "Whiskey neat, whatever you recommend." He poured 2 fingers of something amber and slid the glass across the bar. I took a sip and felt the burn settle in my chest, warm and familiar. "Family event?" he asked, wiping down glasses with the efficiency of someone who'd perfected the motion. "My father's retirement party? Ah, big milestone. You must be proud." Consider the question, was I proud? Dad had worked hard his entire life, provided for his family, and earned the respect of his colleagues. Those were admirable things, worthy of celebration. But pride felt complicated when it came to my relationship with him. "Yeah," I said finally. "He's earned it." The bartender nodded and moved on to other customers, leaving me alone with my drink and my thoughts. I turned around to survey the room, again taking in the scene with fresh eyes. This was Dad's world, I realized. These were his people, his achievements, his legacy. Ryan fit seamlessly into this world. He understood the language, shared the values, could navigate the social dynamics without thinking about it. He belonged here in a way I never had and probably never would. But that didn't have to be a bad thing, I told myself. I'd built my own world, found my own people, created my own version of success. The fact that it didn't translate easily to this room didn't make it less valuable. I was finishing my drink and contemplating whether to stay for dinner when I heard the sound system crackle to life. Someone was tapping a microphone at the front of the room. Conversations began to quiet as people turned their attention toward the small stage area. The evening's program was about to begin, and whatever happened next would determine whether I'd remember this night as just another family obligation or something much more significant. I had no idea I was about to find out exactly where I stood in the Peterson family hierarchy, that the answer would change everything. The microphone squealed with feedback, making everyone wince and chuckle nervously. Bill Henderson, Dad's longtime friend, an unofficial master of ceremonies for the evening, adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. If I could have everyone's attention, please. We're going to get started with the program. I found myself gravitating toward the back of the room. Old habits die hard. From here, I could see everything. Dad standing near the front, looking both proud and slightly uncomfortable with the attention. Mom beaming beside him, Ryan positioned perfectly to be called upon if needed. The supporting cast arranged exactly as expected. I blinked in surprise. This wasn't the script I'd been expecting. Jake earned a scholarship to Northwestern, full ride, based on academic merit. He graduated with honors and landed a job at one of those tech companies in Chicago that's changing the way the world works. The applause was polite, but confused. I could see people looking around trying to figure out if they were supposed to be impressed by things they didn't fully understand. I'll be honest with you folks, Bill continued, his voice taking on a more personal tone. I don't pretend to understand what Jake does for a living, something about apps and software, and making phones smarter than the people who use them. Scattered laughter rippled through the room. But I know this. Last month, Jake's company was featured in Forbes magazine. Forbes. That's the same magazine that writes about billionaires and Fortune 500 CEOs. And there was our Jake, leading a team of 20 people, building something that millions of customers use every day. The room was quieter now, people processing this information. I could see confusion on some faces, curiosity on others. My success existed in a language they didn't speak, but they were beginning to recognize that it was success nonetheless. Jake represents the future in ways that frankly make my head spin. While we were learning to use email, he was inventing it. While we're still figuring out how to work our smartphones, he's designing the next generation. I felt a strange mix of pride and discomfort. It was surreal hearing myself described this way, especially in front of people who'd known me as the quiet kid who spent too much time on computers. Both of Tom's sons have made him proud in their own ways, Bill concluded. Ryan, by honoring the traditions that made this community strong, and Jake, by blazing trails into a future we can barely imagine. The applause was stronger now, and I could feel eyes turning toward me. I raised my hand slightly in acknowledgement, not quite sure how to process what had just happened, but as the clapping died down, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Dad wasn't applauding. He was standing there with his arms crossed, his expression somewhere between discomfort and irritation. When our eyes met across the room, I saw something I hadn't expected, disappointment. Bill handed the microphone to Dad, and the room settled into expectant silence. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the guest of honor's speech. The culmination of 35 years of service, the passing of the torch from one generation to the next. Dad took the microphone and surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on familiar faces before landing on his family. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Thank you all for being here tonight. When I started at Midwest Manufacturing 35 years ago, I never imagined I'd end up in management, let alone regional management. I was just a kid from the South Side who needed a job and was willing to work hard for it. He paused, letting that sink in. This was Dad's origin story, the narrative that defined how he saw himself and his place in the world. I learned early on that success isn't about being the smartest person in the room or having the fanciest ideas. It's about showing up every day, doing your job with integrity, and building something lasting for the people who depend on you. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. This was a message that resonated with everyone in the room, the value of steady, dependable, work over flashy innovation. I've been blessed with a wonderful wife who supported me through every challenge and celebration. Nancy, you've been my partner in everything that matters. He turned to Mom, who wiped away a tear and blew him a kiss. 34 years of marriage. Reduced to a moment of public acknowledgement, but I could see the genuine affection between them. And I've been blessed with 2 sons who've taught me different lessons about what it means to be a father. Here it comes, I thought, the part where he talks about Ryan's achievements and my ... alternative path, and has been everything I could have hoped for in a son. He understood from an early age what it takes to build a meaningful life. He worked hard in school, not because someone forced him to, but because he understood that excellence is a habit. Played sports, not for glory, but because he learned that being part of a team teaches you about commitment and sacrifice. Dad's voice was warming up now, hitting the notes of a speech he'd probably been mentally rehearsing for weeks. After college, Ryan came back home. He could have gone anywhere, done anything, but he chose to build his life here in the community that raised him. He married a local girl, bought a house 5 minutes from where he grew up, and he's raising his children with the same values Nancy and I tried to instill in him. The pride in Dad's voice was unmistakable. This was the son who'd made all the right choices, who'd validated every parenting decision, who'd become living proof that traditional values still mattered. Ryan represents continuity. He took what we taught him and made it better, but he didn't throw away the foundation we built together. He's the kind of son who makes a father feel like he did something right. The applause was enthusiastic, and I found myself clapping along even as my chest tightened with each word. Hey, this was the son, worth celebrating, the one whose achievements everyone could understand and appreciate. But Dad wasn't finished. And then there's Jake. The room quieted again, and I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Dad's expression was harder to read now, but his tone had shifted slightly. Jake has always been different. Even as a little boy, he was off in his own world, more interested in taking things apart than putting them together. While Ryan was learning teamwork on the football field, Jake was alone in his room with his computers. I could feel heat rising in my face. This wasn't the warm acknowledgement Bill had offered. This felt like something else entirely. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being smart. Jake is certainly that. But intelligence without direction, without purpose, without connection to something bigger than yourself, that's just potential energy with nowhere to go. The room was uncomfortable now. People were shifting in their seats, unsure whether they were witnessing a father's tribute or something more complicated. Jake went off to college and then to Chicago, chasing opportunities in industries I don't pretend to understand. He's made good money, I'll give him that. Drives a fancy car and lives in a downtown condo, and I'm sure his coworkers think very highly of him. Each word felt like a small cut. Dad was acknowledging my success while simultaneously diminishing it, praising my achievements while making it clear they didn't measure up to what really mattered. But success isn't just about personal achievement. It's about contribution. About building something that lasts, something that serves your community, something that makes the world a little bit better for the people around you. I could see where this was going now, and my hands were starting to shake. Ryan built a life that honors the values we taught him. He's contributing to his community, raising the next generation, showing up for the people who matter. Jake. Dad paused, his eyes finding mine across the room. Jake has built a life that serves himself. Silence in the room was deafening. I could hear my heart beat in my ears, could feel the curious and sympathetic stares of 50 people who were witnessing something they probably shouldn't be seeing. Now, I know some of you think I'm being too hard on him, and maybe I am. But as a father, It's my job to speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Dad's voice was getting stronger now, more confident, like he was warming to his theme. The truth is, I don't understand the choices Jake has made. I don't understand how someone can be satisfied building imaginary things for people he'll never meet, solving problems that don't affect the real world. I don't understand how someone can live hundreds of miles away from the people who love him and call that success. My vision was starting to blur around the edges. This wasn't just disappointment or misunderstanding. This was a public condemnation of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, everything I'd become. So while I'm proud of both my sons in different ways, I want to be clear about something. Ryan has become the kind of man I hope to raise, Jake. He paused again, and when he continued, his voice carried a finality that hit me like a physical blow. Jake will never amount to anything that really matters. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had just consumed everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my father. Never amount to anything that really matters. Not hasn't yet, not might someday, but will never. Stood there for a moment, paralyzed by the completeness of the rejection. This wasn't about different values or misunderstanding. This was about fundamental worth, about whether my life had any meaning at all in his eyes, and then something inside. He snapped. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. With deliberate calm, I opened my email app and scrolled to a message I'd received 3 days earlier. A message I'd been planning to share with the family privately. After the party, when the moment felt right, but the moment had found me instead, I walked toward the front of the room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Dad watched me approach. With confusion and a growing alarm, probably wondering if I was about to make a scene, I was. "Dad," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the acoustic-friendly ballroom. "I got an email on Tuesday that I think you should hear. I didn't wait for permission. Didn't ask if I could interrupt. I just started reading. Dear Mr. Peterson, we are pleased to inform you that Tech Forward Solutions has been selected as the primary software provider for the Chicago Public School District's new digital learning initiative. This 3-year contract, valued at $42 million, will provide educational technology solutions to over 640 schools serving more than 400,000 students." The room was dead silent now. Could hear the heating system cycling on. Could hear someone's watch ticking 3 tables away. The board was particularly impressed with your team's innovative approach to adaptive learning software and your commitment. 2. Closing the digital divide in underserved communities. This partnership will directly impact the educational outcomes of thousands of children across Chicago. I looked up from my phone, meeting Dad's eyes directly. The email goes on, but I think that's the important part. $42 million. Dad. 400,000 kids whose education will be improved by imaginary things I built for people I'll never meet. I could see the color draining from his face as he processed the numbers, the scope, the implications. But that's not the best part, I continued, my voice getting stronger as I went. The best part is what we're doing with the profits. Percent of our contract revenue is going into a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who want to study computer science. Kids who might not otherwise have the opportunity to learn the skills they need to succeed in the economy of the future. I paused, letting that sink in. That fund will start with $8 million, Dad. $8 million that will send kids to college who couldn't afford it otherwise. Kids who might grow up to solve problems we can't even imagine yet. The silence stretched on, but it felt different now. Not uncomfortable, but electric, with possibility. You want to talk about contribution? About making the world better? I'm not just building software, Dad. I'm building the future. I'm creating tools that help teachers teach better and students learn faster. I'm opening doors for kids who remind me of myself at their age, kids who are smart and driven but don't fit into traditional boxes. I could see Mom wiping away tears, could see Ryan staring at me with something that might have been respectful, could see strangers in the audience leaning forward to catch every word. You said I'll never amount to anything that really matters. But here's what I think matters. Giving a kid from the south side of Chicago the same chance you had 35 years ago when you walked into a manufacturing plant and asked for a job. Except instead of learning to work on an assembly line, They're learning to build the systems that will run the assembly lines of tomorrow. Dad was still holding the microphone, but he'd lowered it to his side. His expression was unreadable, but his posture had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like uncertainty. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the life Ryan built. It's a good life, an honorable life, and I respect the choices he's made. But it's not the only kind of life worth living. I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice so the audience had to strain to hear. I came here tonight planning to tell you about the contract privately. I wanted to share my success with my family to help you understand what I've been building all these years. But then you stood up here and told 50 people that I'll never amount to anything that matters. Dad opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to find a way to make you proud of me on my own terms. But I realize now that was never going to happen. You can only be proud of the version of success you understand, and what I do is beyond your frame of reference. I turned to address the room directly. I want everyone here to know that I love my father. He taught me the value of hard work, integrity, and persistence. Those lessons served me well, even if I applied them in ways he didn't expect. But love doesn't mean accepting someone else's definition of your worth. The applause started slowly, just a few people clapping hesitantly. But it built momentum, growing stronger and more confident until the entire room was on their feet. I handed the microphone back to Dad, whose hand was shaking slightly as he took it. "Jake," he said, his voice barely audible over the applause. "I didn't know. I didn't understand. I know," I said simply. "But now you do." I turned and walked back toward my table, but I didn't sit down. Instead, I kept walking, past the surprised faces and whispered conversations, past the balloons and banners celebrating 35 years of service, past the life I'd never quite fit into in the parking lot. I sat in my Tesla for a few minutes, letting the adrenaline fade and the reality sink in. My phone was buzzing with text messages from Mom, from Ryan, from cousins and family friends who'd witnessed what had just happened. But I didn't read them yet. Instead, I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, driving back to Ward. The highway that would take me home to Chicago, 3 hours later, I was back in my condo, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the conversation I'd just had with my father. Not the public confrontation, but the private moment afterward, when he'd followed me to the parking lot. "I'm sorry," he'd said, standing beside my car in his retirement party suit, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. I thought if I pushed you toward something more stable, more traditional, you'd be happier." "I am happy, Dad. I'm exactly where I want to be. I can see that now. I don't know how to relate to what you do. Like you're speaking a foreign language." "Then learn the language," I'd said. "I've been speaking to you my whole life." He'd nodded, understanding passing between us for maybe the first time. "The scholarship fund," he'd said. "That was your idea?" "Yeah, I remember what it felt like to worry about money for college. No kid should have to choose between their education and their family's financial security." He'd been quiet for a long moment.
Nice.
"I'm proud of you, Jake. I should have said that years ago. You're saying it now. That's what matters." As I sat in my condo that night, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in my relationship with Dad, but in how I saw myself. For 30 years, I'd been trying to translate my success into terms he could understand. But my success didn't need translation. It stood on its own merits, created its own value, opened its own doors. I'd spent so long seeking approval that I'd forgotten the most important thing. I didn't need it. My work mattered because it made a difference in the world. My choices were valid because they aligned with my values. My life had meaning because I said it did. The next morning I got a text from Ryan. "I had no idea what you'd accomplished. I'm sorry I never asked." From Mom. "Your father couldn't sleep last night. He's been reading about your company online. He wants to understand." And from Dad, 3 simple words that meant everything. "Teach me, son." 6 months later, Dad visited me in Chicago. I showed him around the office, introduced him to my team, explained what we were building and why it mattered. He didn't understand all of it, but he listened with the kind of attention I'd craved my entire life. On his last day, we had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. As we waited for our food, he pulled out his phone and showed me a news article. "I set up a Google alert for your company," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to see what people were saying about you." The article was about our scholarship program, which had just awarded its first round of grants to 30 kids from underserved communities. "This student here," Dad said, pointing to a photo of a young girl holding an acceptance letter. "She reminds me of you at that age. Smart, determined, full of ideas about how to change the world." I looked at the photo and smiled. "Her name is Maria. She's going to study artificial intelligence at MIT. Full ride, plus a summer internship at our company."
Dad nodded. "Studying?"
"The photo, you know what I realized? What's that? I spent so many years worried about whether you were building something that would last. But this, .. He gestured at the article. "This is going to outlast anything I ever built. These kids will graduate and change the world, and it'll be because you gave them the chance." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd been waiting for my entire life. "You amount to everything, son. Everything that really matters." That night, I called the office and told them I'd be working from Milwaukee for the rest of the week. Some bridges are worth rebuilding, even when you thought they were burned beyond repair, especially then. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.